And our next speaker is Björn Hartmann. Yes, okay, here he is. And he's going to have an interesting spin on becoming an HCI researcher after you've been something else.
Thank you, Scott. All right, the year's 2003. It's 3 a.m. in the morning, and I'm standing on stage at Club Milk in Tokyo, playing bleepy minimal techno to a group of 150 sweaty dancers. This was a key moment that inspired me to go into human-computer interaction. But how did I end up there, and what does minimal techno have to do with HCI? So let me backtrack. In college in Philadelphia, I studied in a program that mixed fine arts, social sciences, and computer science, but it was really focused on sending people into the 3D graphics industry. Think ILM, Pixar, Electronic Arts. My passion was not graphics, though. It was music. I spent my weekends and way too many weeknights at clubs and warehouse parties of, let's say, questionable legality in Philadelphia. And after a while, I started DJing myself, producing tracks with a group of friends, and we sent demos to record labels. They weren't particularly interested in what we had to offer. So what's the natural response to rejection? We're just going to start our own record label. So that we did. It was a very much DIY operation, down to driving an old beat-up Honda Civic to the pressing plant in New Jersey to pick up crates of records and dropping them off at Newark at a shipping terminal. Now, college was drawing to a close, and the question came up, could we actually do this professionally? The answer was yes, just not in the US. So we packed up all of our belongings, and my label partner and I put them on a boat, and then we took a flight to Amsterdam, our new home, where I got a taste of the bohemian life to maybe a greater degree than I was prepared for. Our first music studio was in an old film academy that had been taken over by your friendly neighborhood anarchists and turned into an artist squad. If that doesn't sound like a particularly stable situation, that's probably about right. So our second music studio was a big improvement. It was a former underground bicycle garage that had basically been converted into the real world Amsterdam. Quite a cast of characters, and however, we ended up living there as well, and it didn't take long to figure out that living underground without exposure to sunlight is not such a healthy thing. The record label, on the other hand, was doing great, and we started getting booking requests, first in Europe and then internationally. So that brings me to Tokyo and back to the stage of Milk. Now, bit of theory, in electronic dance music, the user interface that most people use are two turntables playing vinyl records and a mixer in the middle. So one turntable plays out of the speakers to the house. On the second turntable, you cue up your next track, listen to it through the headphones, match the tempo and the beat, and then mix it in on the mixer till you're only at the second track, and then you repeat. Now, those records, though, that I had on stage didn't have any music on them at all. Instead, they had a time code, and this is where it gets interesting for HCI. So those records playing a time code were connected to a laptop that read out the time code and used it to play back MP3 files. This transformed the practice of being a traveling DJ. Why? Because records are really heavy. A record is about half a pound, and so you can carry like 100 records max. After that, it gets really uncomfortable. So 100 records gets you through the night, but it limits your selection. So along comes this interface in software that allows you to have basically an unlimited crate. Now, you may ask, why not just bring the laptop and ditch the turntables? Because as DJs, we spent years honing our skill on the physical interface of manipulating spinning records on a turntable. And so for me, this was the big aha moment. Here's an interface that gives you the benefits and flexibility of digital technology while respecting the embodied practice of a profession. So I wanted to learn more about that. 2 years later, I find myself in grad school at Stanford studying the design of musical instruments with Wilbur Planck, one of the pioneers of interaction design. My first musical instruments were actually no good. However, they got me interested in something else, and that was the tool set behind the instruments. So what were the software and electronics tools that allowed people to build instruments and other electronic products? It also got me to spend time in the machine shop, and that brought up the question how the mindset of HCI can make an impact in a really kind of intimidating environment of machine tools and broaden access to that. So designing instruments, I ended up not making any great instruments, but it led directly to my PhD topic on interaction design tools for product designers. Fast forward another 6 years of living the high life of the tenure track assistant professor and visiting many CHI and WIST and CSCW conferences. And so just very recently, I got the amazing opportunity to participate in planning, launching, and now running a new design institute at UC Berkeley that is particularly aimed at supporting students who want to work at the intersection of art and design and engineering. We've been running for about 2 years, but it got big pretty quickly. So we now have about 1,000 students in our makerspace and about 1,200 taking design classes every semester. And they're building bio-inspired robots and augmented wheelchairs and interactive art installations, and yes, musical instruments. The other thing I really appreciate is now, as a faculty member, I get to advise the next generation of electronic musicians who work at Berkeley Center for New Music and Audio Technologies. And so in many ways, unintentionally, I feel like I've come full circle here in supporting students like I was in finding their own path. And from working in squats to managing a design institute, from standing on stage in underground clubs to now sitting on this stage, what's really interesting to me is this is only a coherent narrative in retrospect. At the time, even the next step was barely visible at all. And so I want to encourage all of you to find your own non-obvious winding road. Just make sure you bring enough interesting music along for the ride. Thank you.